The roar of motorcycles echoed through the dense forest as two terrified young women stumbled over uneven ground, their breaths ragged and their faces streaked with tears. Sophia and Emma, daughters of a tech billionaire, had taken a detour on their way to a retreat, only to fall victim to a group of bandits targeting wealthy travelers. Their SUV had been forced off the road, their driver overpowered. Now they were running for their lives. "Keep moving," Sophia urged, pulling her younger sister by the arm. Emma, though exhausted, pushed herself forward, her heart hammering in her chest. The bandits were closing in. Their gruff voices carried through the trees like the growl of wolves hunting prey. Suddenly, the two sisters burst into a clearing. Standing before them was a man, lean and rugged, with eyes sharp as steel. His clothes were simple, patched in places, but his presence was commanding. This was Daniel, a kind-hearted but impoverished man who eked out a living gathering herbs in the forest. Before the sisters could explain, the first bandit charged into the clearing. Without hesitation, Daniel stepped forward. "Stay behind me," he ordered. The girls froze, unsure if the stranger could help against the 5 men who emerged from the trees, armed with knives and clubs. Daniel had no weapon, only the resolve of someone who had faced life's harshest challenges and refused to back down. "What do you want?" Daniel asked, his voice steady but cold. The leader of the bandits smirked. "Those two. Step aside, hero, and you won't get hurt." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not happening." The bandit lunged, but Daniel moved like a coiled spring. In one swift motion, he sidestepped, grabbing a fallen branch from the ground. The makeshift weapon cracked against the attacker's arm, sending him reeling. The other bandits closed in, but Daniel fought with a ferocity born of necessity, using every ounce of his strength and wit. Sophia watched, her fear giving way to awe. There was something magnetic about this man, his courage, his selflessness. Her heart raced, not just from the danger, but from something she couldn't yet name. As the fight raged, Daniel sustained cuts and bruises, but he refused to yield. His determination unnerved the bandits. One by one, they faltered and fled, leaving their leader behind. The last man standing stared at Daniel with hatred but also fear. Finally, he spat on the ground and disappeared into the woods. Daniel dropped the branch, his chest heaving. "Are you two all right?" he asked, turning to the sisters. Sophia stepped forward, her voice trembling. You saved our lives." "Thank you." Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We thought we were going to die." Daniel offered a faint smile. "You're safe now. Let's get you out of here." Daniel led the sisters through the dense forest, retracing his mental map of trails and hidden paths he had learned over years of foraging. As the adrenaline of the fight faded, pain surged through his body. His shirt, tattered and smeared with dirt and blood, stuck to a gash on his side, but he pressed on, unwilling to slow down. Sophia noticed his labored breathing and reached out to steady him. "You're hurt," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "It's nothing," Daniel replied, his tone firm but kind. "We need to get you two to safety first." Emma looked over her shoulder, fear still evident in her eyes. "What if they come back?" "They won't," Daniel assured her, though he tightened his grip on the branch he still carried, just in case. After what felt like hours, they emerged onto a dirt road. The sisters' SUV sat abandoned nearby, its windows shattered, but the vehicle itself was intact. Daniel inspected it quickly, finding the keys still in the ignition. "You're lucky they didn't take this," he said, opening the door for them. Sophia hesitated, turning to him. "What about you? You're coming with us, right?" Daniel shook his head. "This is where we part ways. You'll be fine from here." Sophia's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't just walk away. You're bleeding. At least let us take you to a doctor." "I'll be all right," Daniel said, stepping back. "Just drive. Get somewhere safe." Sophia opened her mouth to protest, but Emma tugged at her arm. "Sophia, let's go. Please." Reluctantly, Sophia climbed into the SUV. As the engine roared to life, she leaned out of the window. "Thank you, Daniel. I won't forget this." He nodded, watching as the vehicle disappeared down the road. Only then did he allow himself to collapse onto the grass, exhaustion overtaking him. Meanwhile, back at their father's sprawling mansion, the sisters burst through the doors, frantic and shaken. Their father, Richard Belmont, a towering man with a commanding presence, rose from his armchair, his face etched with worry. "Where have you been?" he demanded, rushing to embrace them. "I've had the police searching everywhere." Sophia and Emma recounted the harrowing events, from the bandits to the mysterious man who had saved them. Richard listened, his expression darkening with every detail. "He saved us, Dad," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "If it weren't for him, we'd be dead." "Who is this man?" Richard asked. "What's his name?" "Daniel," Sophia replied. "He didn't tell us much else. He wouldn't even let us help him." Richard's jaw tightened. "Then we'll find him. A man like that deserves more than just our thanks." The next day, Daniel awoke in his small cabin to the sound of knocking. Groggy and still sore, he opened the door to find two men in suits standing on his porch. "Daniel?" one of them asked. "Yes," Daniel replied warily. The man extended a hand. "We're representatives of Richard Belmont. He'd like to meet with you." Daniel frowned. "Why?" The second man smiled. "Let's just say he's very grateful for what you did." Hours later, Daniel found himself standing in front of a mansion that looked like something out of a dream. The opulence was overwhelming, and he felt out of place in his simple, threadbare clothes. Inside, Richard greeted him with a firm handshake. "You're the man who saved my daughters," Richard said, his voice warm but commanding. "I owe you everything." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would have done." "Don't sell yourself short," Richard said. "Courage like yours is rare. I want to reward you." "I don't need a reward," Daniel said firmly. "I only did what was right." Before Richard could respond, Sophia entered the room. She froze when she saw Daniel, her heart skipping a beat. He looked different here, still rugged but somehow more vulnerable. Their eyes met, and an unspoken connection passed between them. "Daniel," she said softly, stepping forward. "You came." He nodded. "Your father insisted." As the conversation continued, Sophia found reasons to linger near Daniel, her feelings growing stronger with every passing moment. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, humble, brave, and unshakably kind. Over the following days, Richard tried to offer Daniel money, a new home, even a job in his company, but Daniel refused all of it. He wasn't interested in wealth or luxury. What he couldn't refuse, however, was Sophia's presence. She sought him out constantly, drawn to his quiet strength and the warmth in his eyes. One evening, as they walked together in the mansion's sprawling gardens, Sophia finally confessed her feelings. "I can't stop thinking about you," she said, her voice trembling. "You're the kind of man I've been searching for my whole life." Daniel stopped, his heart pounding. "Sophia, I'm not." "Don't," she interrupted, placing a hand on his chest. "Don't tell me you're not good enough. You've already proven you are." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes, the weight of his struggles momentarily lifting. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that happiness might be within reach.
Hannah's fingers tightened on the steering wheel as her old sedan sputtered along the quiet road. She didn't have time for distractions, not when rent was due tomorrow, and she barely had enough gas to make it home. But then, she spotted him. A man stood by the side of the road, his coat soaked through, holding up a sign that read, "Help needed. Urgent." Her stomach churned. This wasn't her problem. She should keep driving. Yet something about the defeated slump of his shoulders pulled at her conscience. Against every rational thought, she slowed to a stop and rolled down her window. "Are you okay?" she called, rain drumming on her car roof. The man stepped closer, his graying hair plastered to his forehead. His voice trembled. "My car broke down miles back, and I need to get to an important meeting. Please, if you could just drop me off at the nearest gas station." Hannah hesitated. This could be dangerous, but he looked more desperate than threatening, and she'd been in his shoes too many times to ignore him. She gestured to the passenger seat. "Get in." The man climbed into the passenger seat, dripping water onto the torn fabric. Hannah cringed at the state of her car. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She glanced at him briefly as she pulled back onto the road. His suit, though soaked, was high quality, and his polished shoes didn't belong to someone struggling like her. "Thank you," he said, his voice strained. "I know stopping for a stranger isn't easy." Hannah offered a tight smile. "I've been where you are. Sometimes you just need a little help." He nodded, but his expression remained tense. "I owe you one." They drove in silence for a few minutes, the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers filling the car. Hannah's curiosity got the better of her. "So, what's this meeting? Must be important if you're out here in the middle of nowhere." "It's not just important," he said, staring out the window. "It's everything." His cryptic answer made her raise an eyebrow, but she didn't press. She had enough problems of her own. The man shifted uncomfortably, and she noticed him clutching a leather briefcase as if it were a lifeline. Suddenly, he spoke again, his tone more urgent. "Can you take a different route? I think someone might be following me." Hannah's grip on the wheel tightened. "What do you mean, following you?" The man's eyes darted to the side mirror. "I don't have time to explain, but please, just turn left up ahead." "Trust me." Hannah hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to kick him out of the car, but the panic in his voice was undeniable. Against her better judgment, she turned down the deserted side road, the headlights cutting through the rain-soaked darkness. "Thank you," he said quietly, his relief palpable. "Look, I'm not trying to get involved in anything dangerous," she said, her voice firm. "If there's trouble, you need to tell me now." The man sighed heavily. "My name is Robert Sinclair. Let's just say I run a large corporation. There's a lot of money at stake, and some people aren't happy about my decisions. That's all I can say." Hannah's stomach twisted. "You're some kind of CEO." He gave a faint smile. "Something like that." Before she could process his words, bright headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Her heart jumped as the car behind them sped closer, its engine roaring. "Faster," Robert urged. "Please." Hannah didn't need to be told twice. She slammed her foot on the gas, her old car protesting with a groan. The vehicle behind them didn't back off, staying dangerously close. "What's going on?" she yelled, panic creeping into her voice. "Just keep driving," Robert shouted. The pursuing car suddenly swerved, attempting to cut them off. Hannah's heart raced as she gripped the wheel, swerving onto a side road to avoid a collision. The rain made the road slick, and the tires skidded briefly before gaining traction. "Take this," Robert said, thrusting the briefcase toward her. "If anything happens to me, make sure this gets to my lawyer. His name is on the card inside." "What?" "No," she snapped. "I'm not getting dragged into whatever this is." "You already are," he said, his voice grim. "Please just promise me." Before Hannah could argue, the pursuing car sped ahead, blocking the road. She slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. The rain pounded against the windshield as two figures emerged from the other vehicle, their silhouettes ominous in the downpour. "What do they want from you?" she whispered, fear clawing at her chest. "They're after what's in the briefcase," Robert said, his voice low. "But they can't have it, no matter what." Hannah's breath quickened as the two figures approached, their movements deliberate and unhurried. She glanced at Robert, who seemed eerily calm despite the situation. "They'll destroy everything if they get it," he muttered, gripping her arm. "Trust me, Hannah. You can't let them." "How do you know my name?" she hissed, her panic rising. "Your ID was on your dashboard," he said quickly. "I swear, I mean you no harm. Just keep it safe no matter what." The figures were close now, their faces obscured by the shadows and rain. One of them rapped on her window with the butt of a flashlight. "Step out of the car," the man said, his voice sharp. "We just need to talk." Hannah's fingers trembled on the wheel. "What do I do?" she whispered to Robert. "Don't open the door," he replied, his tone firm but quiet. "They'll take the briefcase, and you might not make it out. What do you expect me to do? Drive through them?" Robert didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward and locked eyes with her. "Do you trust me?" "No," she blurted, her voice shaking. "I don't even know you." "Fair," he said, a flicker of a smile crossing his face despite the circumstances. "But if you don't trust me, trust yourself. Get us out of here." Before she could respond, the man outside slammed his fist against the glass. Last warning. Open the door, or we'll do it for you. Adrenaline surged through Hannah. She yanked the gear shift into reverse and slammed on the gas. The car jerked backward, tires spinning on the wet pavement. The man outside stumbled, narrowly avoiding the back bumper, but the other figure wasn't deterred. He sprinted toward them as she swerved the car around and sped down the road. "Keep going," Robert shouted. "Don't stop." The pursuers scrambled back into their SUV, its headlights flaring as it roared to life and gave chase. Hannah's old sedan rattled with every bump and turn, but she pushed it as fast as it would go. "I can't outrun them," she yelled, her voice tight with fear. "You don't have to," Robert said. "Just get us to the city. They won't risk making a scene there." Hannah's heart thundered as she veered onto the highway, the SUV gaining ground. Her car shook violently, and she prayed it wouldn't give out now. "Why me?" she snapped, her frustration bubbling over. "Why did I have to be the one to pick you up?" "Because you're a good person," Robert said simply. "And I'm out of options." "That doesn't exactly make me feel better," she shot back. The SUV rammed into the rear of her car, jolting them both forward. Hannah screamed, gripping the wheel as the car swerved. Robert reached over to steady her. "Hold on," he said. "Take the next exit now." Hannah yanked the wheel, barely making the turn onto the ramp. The SUV followed, its tires squealing on the slick asphalt. Ahead, the city lights flickered like a beacon of hope through the rain. "Almost there," Robert said, his voice a mixture of urgency and relief. "They won't follow us into a crowded area." Hannah wasn't convinced, but she didn't have a better plan. The SUV closed the gap again, its engine roaring like a predator hunting its prey. She tightened her grip, every muscle in her body tense, as she navigated the rain-soaked streets. Finally, they reached a bustling intersection. The SUV abruptly slowed, its headlights dimming before it turned down a side street and disappeared. Hannah pulled over, her hands shaking so badly she could barely put the car in park. She turned to Robert, her chest heaving. "What just happened? Who were those people?" Robert exhaled, his expression weary but grateful. "People who think money is everything." "But what's in this briefcase?" "It's worth more than any fortune they could imagine." "What's in it?" she demanded. He hesitated, then opened the case slightly, just enough for her to see a stack of documents and a small USB drive. "This is evidence, proof of corruption that could bring down some of the most powerful people in the country." Hannah's jaw dropped. "You're telling me I just risked my life for papers?" "For justice," he corrected. "And for the truth. I'm sorry I dragged you into this, but you're the only one I could trust." She leaned back, her head spinning. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. All she wanted was to help someone in need, not to become a target in some high-stakes conspiracy. Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "If you get into trouble, call this number. It's my lawyer. He'll know what to do." "You're just leaving me with this?" she asked, her voice rising. "For now," he said. "But trust me, Hannah, this might be the best thing that's ever happened to you." And with that, he slipped out of the car and disappeared into the rainy night, leaving her with the briefcase, a card, and more questions than she knew how to handle. Hannah sat in her car, heart pounding, staring at the briefcase Robert had left behind. Rain drummed against the roof as the weight of her situation hit her like a tidal wave. She had been scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck, and now she was somehow caught in a web of corruption and danger. Her hands trembled as she picked up the card Robert had given her. It read, "Daniel Cross, attorney at law. Confidential matters only." A phone number was listed beneath. She had no idea if she could trust him, but what other choice did she have? She dialed the number with shaking fingers. It rang twice before a deep, calm voice answered. "This is Daniel Cross." "Mr. Cross, my name is Hannah. Robert Sinclair gave me your number. He said you'd know what to do." There was a long pause. "You're with the briefcase?" "Yes," she replied, glancing nervously out the window. "He left it with me, and—" "Are you safe?" Cross interrupted, his tone sharp. "For now, but someone was chasing us." "Listen carefully," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Do not open the briefcase. Bring it to my office immediately. I'll send you the address. Be cautious. If they followed you, they'll try again." Moments later, Her phone buzzed with a text containing the address. It was downtown in the heart of the city. Taking a deep breath, she started the car and pulled back onto the road. The drive to Cross's office was tense, every set of headlights in her rearview mirror making her heart race. When she finally arrived at the high-rise building, she parked and clutched the briefcase tightly as she hurried inside. The receptionist seemed to recognize the urgency and waved her through without question. She took the elevator to the 15th floor, where Cross's office was located. The man himself, tall and imposing with a neatly trimmed beard, opened the door before she even knocked. "Hannah, come in," he said, ushering her inside. The office was sleek and modern, but Hannah barely noticed as she placed the briefcase on his desk. Robert said this was evidence. "What's in it?" she asked. Cross opened the case and scanned the documents and USB drive inside. His expression darkened. "This is everything we need to expose a network of corruption that's been untouchable for years. Corporate fraud, bribery, even human rights violations. It's all here." Hannah's stomach turned. "Why would Robert trust me with this?" "Because he saw something in you," Cross said simply. "And because people like you, ordinary citizens, are often overlooked by those who think they're untouchable." Before Hannah could respond, the office phone rang. Cross answered it, his expression growing graver by the second. "They know you're here," he said after hanging up. "We need to move." "What do you mean move?" she exclaimed, panic rising. "They'll come for this evidence. And for you. But don't worry," he said, grabbing the briefcase and pulling out another small case. "We have a backup plan." He handed her a smaller, identical briefcase. "This is a decoy. You're going to help us misdirect them while we get the real evidence into the right hands." "What? No, I didn't sign up for this." "You signed up the moment you helped Robert," Cross said, his voice firm but not unkind. "If you don't help, everything he's worked for, everything you risked, will be for nothing." Hannah's role was simple but terrifying. She left the office with the decoy case, her job to act as a distraction while Cross and his team delivered the real evidence to the authorities. She drove aimlessly, her heart pounding every time she spotted a car behind her. Sure enough, within 20 minutes, she realized she was being followed again. "Stay calm," Cross had instructed her. "Lead them as far away as you can." Every instinct told her to panic, but she held her nerve, weaving through the city until she reached the outskirts. The pursuing car stayed close, but she kept going, her mind racing for a plan. Finally, she spotted a crowded gas station. Thinking quickly, she pulled in and parked near the pumps where dozens of people milled about. She grabbed the decoy briefcase and got out, blending into the crowd. The pursuers hesitated, clearly unwilling to make a scene. Hannah used the distraction to slip into the gas station's convenience store and out the back door, leaving the decoy case in the alley. Hours later, back in the safety of her tiny apartment, her phone rang. It was Cross. "It's done," he said. "The evidence is secure, and the authorities are already moving on the perpetrators." "You did more than you realize, Hannah." Relief flooded her. But before she could respond, he added, "And Robert didn't forget you." "What do you mean?" she asked, confused. "I think you should check your bank account," Cross said, his voice warm with approval. Hannah hung up and opened her banking app. Her jaw dropped. The balance showed a figure she couldn't have dreamed of, a 7-figure deposit labeled "For a Brighter Future, R. Sinclair." Tears streamed down her face as the realization sank in. By helping a stranger, she hadn't just saved herself. She'd uncovered strength and courage she never knew she had. And now, she had the chance to rebuild her life and make a difference in ways she'd only dreamed of. Layla Gray didn't hear the knock at first over the sound of rain pounding against her window. She sat on her couch, a single dim lamp illuminating the otherwise dark room, her hands clutching an overdue rent notice. The month had been brutal. Double shifts at the diner, broken-down car, and a manager who thought overtime pay was a mythical concept. The knock came again, sharper this time. Layla froze, her heart skipping a beat. She lived alone in a crumbling studio apartment where unexpected visitors were a rarity and rarely a good sign. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice tinged with unease. Miss Gray, a man's voice replied, formal and measured. My name is Nolan Vance. I'm here on behalf of Daniel Cole. The name didn't register immediately. She wasn't sure if she should open the door, but something about the man's tone, or the way he said Daniel's name, made her stand. Slowly, she cracked the door open to reveal a sharply dressed man holding a briefcase, his expression both professional and unreadable. "Who?" she asked, frowning. "May I come in?" Nolan asked, glancing at the rain-soaked hallway. Layla hesitated. She was exhausted, and this was far too strange. But curiosity edged out caution. She stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. "Daniel Cole," Layla repeated as Nolan took a seat at her rickety kitchen table. "I don't know anyone by that name." "You met him recently," Nolan said, opening his briefcase. "A few days ago, outside Jefferson Hospital." It clicked. The man in the wheelchair. She remembered the rain, the struggle, and the way he had quietly thanked her for a ride. "What about him?" Nolan pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table toward her. "Mr. Cole insisted this be delivered to you in person." Layla stared at the envelope, her brow furrowing. "Why?" "Because," Nolan said with a faint smile, "your kindness meant more to him than you realize." Layla hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in neat, deliberate handwriting, and a check that made her blink in disbelief. "Wait, is this a joke?" she asked, her voice rising. "This can't be real." "I assure you it is," Nolan replied calmly. "Mr. Cole has entrusted this to you as a gesture of gratitude." "Gratitude?" she echoed, her voice nearly breaking. "I gave him a ride. That's it." Nolan's expression softened. "To you, it may have been a small thing. To him, it was life-changing." Layla's fingers tightened around the check as the numbers stared back at her. Far more than she'd ever seen in her life. She felt a sharp pang in her chest, a mix of shock, confusion, and guilt. This has to be a mistake," she stammered, sliding the check back toward Nolan. "I don't deserve this. I didn't do anything." Nolan leaned back slightly, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Miss Gray, Mr. Cole specifically chose you. It's not about what you did. It's about who you are." Layla's laugh was bitter, her exhaustion and frustration bubbling to the surface. "Who I am? I'm nobody. I'm drowning in bills, my car's falling apart, and my manager treats me like a doormat." "You got the wrong person." Nolan's eyes softened. "Mr. Cole doesn't think so. This isn't charity, Miss Gray. It's gratitude. He wanted you to have a chance to change your life, the way you unknowingly changed his." Layla stared at the letter again, the words blurring as her emotions churned. Daniel had written about how invisible he felt, how her small act of kindness had reminded him that he mattered. She felt the weight of his trust pressing on her, heavy and humbling. "I need time to think about this," she murmured finally. Nolan nodded. "Of course, but Mr. Cole's health is fragile. If you have questions or wish to speak with him, I suggest you do so soon." With that, Nolan stood, collecting his briefcase. As he left, Layla sat frozen at the table, staring at the check and wondering how a single moment had led to this. The next morning, Layla's routine felt surreal. The cramped diner where she worked seemed even dingier than usual, the voices of customers fading into the background as her mind replayed the previous night. By the time she dragged herself home that evening, her body ached, and her thoughts hadn't settled. She was about to collapse onto her couch when her phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, and for a moment, she considered ignoring it. But something made her pick up. "Miss Gray?" a faint voice asked. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "This is Daniel Cole." Layla's breath caught. I wasn't expecting. How did you get my number?" "Nolan," he said simply, a trace of humor in his tone. "I hope you don't mind." "No, it's just, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Daniel said gently. "I just wanted to thank you." Again, Layla sank onto her couch, the fatigue of the day catching up with her. "I don't understand why you're doing this. I gave you a ride, that's all." "To you, it was nothing," Daniel replied, his voice tinged with something she couldn't quite place. "But to me, it was everything. I've spent years feeling like a burden, like I don't matter. That day, you reminded me that kindness still exists, even when people don't have much to give. Layla's throat tightened. But I didn't do anything special. Sometimes, the smallest gestures mean the most, Daniel said. They spoke for a few more minutes, his words quiet but heartfelt. By the time the call ended, Layla felt a strange sense of warmth, along with the growing weight of the decision she needed to make. 3 days later, Layla found herself standing outside Jefferson Hospital, her nerves fraying with every second. She called Nolan to arrange the visit, unsure of what to expect, but feeling compelled to meet Daniel in person. The receptionist directed her to his room, and with a deep breath, she knocked softly on the door. "Come in," Daniel's voice called faintly. Layla stepped inside, her eyes immediately landing on the man she'd only glimpsed briefly before. He was pale, his body thin and frail, but his smile was warm and genuine. "Layla," he said, his eyes lighting up, "I'm glad you came." She offered a nervous smile as she approached his bedside. I needed to see you. I still don't understand why you do all of this for me." Daniel gestured for her to sit, his movements slow but deliberate. "I know it seems strange, but when you stopped that day, when you helped me, it reminded me of who I used to be, someone who believed in paying kindness forward." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "You didn't just help me get to the hospital," he continued. "You gave me a moment of dignity, a reminder that I wasn't invisible. And I wanted to give that back to you." Layla looked away, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "I don't know if I can accept this. It feels too much." Daniel smiled softly. "Then don't think of it as a gift. Think of it as a chance to start fresh, to build something better. You deserve that." Over the next few weeks, Layla wrestled with her decision. The money could solve so many of her problems, but it also felt like a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. But as she thought about Daniel's words, about his belief in her, she began to see it differently. This wasn't about deserving or earning. It was about honoring his trust. Slowly, she started to make changes. She paid off her overdue bills, fixed her car, and began volunteering at a local shelter, inspired by Daniel's example of paying kindness forward. Each step felt like reclaiming a part of herself she'd lost along the way. Layla's life began to shift in ways she hadn't imagined. The financial relief brought a sense of stability she hadn't felt in years, but it was the emotional weight of Daniel's gesture that truly spurred her forward. Her volunteering at the shelter quickly became more than just a way to give back. It was a place where she connected with others who, like her, had once felt unseen and forgotten. Over time, she became a vital part of their community, organizing food drives, coordinating donations, and listening to stories that reminded her how powerful even the smallest acts of kindness could be. But not everything came easily. At the diner, whispers started circulating among her coworkers. A few had noticed her fixed car, her lighter demeanor, and the subtle but noticeable improvement in her wardrobe. "Guess you found yourself a sugar daddy," one of the waitresses joked, her tone more biting than playful. Layla ignored the comment, but it stung. She wasn't ashamed of Daniel's gift, but she wasn't ready to explain it either. How could she make them understand that this wasn't about money? It was about hope. One day, as Layla was finishing her shift, a man walked into the diner and sat at the counter. He was tall, with sharp features and an air of confidence that set him apart from the usual crowd. "Coffee black," he said, flashing her a polite smile. Layla poured the coffee, her curiosity piqued. "First time here?" He nodded. "I heard about this place from someone who said you make the best pie in town." Layla smirked. "We might. Depends on who told you." The man chuckled. "Nolan Vance." Her hand froze mid-pour, her heart skipping a beat. "You know Nolan?" "Yes. I'm a friend of Daniel's." He extended a hand. "Jordan Price." Layla hesitated before shaking it. "Layla Gray. What brings you here?" Jordan's expression softened. "Daniel asked me to check in on you. He's been talking about you a lot lately." Layla felt a warmth in her chest, though it was tempered by concern. "How's he doing?" Jordan's smile faltered. "He's hanging in there, but his condition's getting worse." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had only met Daniel once since that first encounter, but the bond they'd formed in such a short time felt profound. I want to see him, she said quietly. Good, Jordan replied. He'd like that. Layla visited Daniel the following week, bringing along a small potted plant she'd picked up from a local shop. It wasn't much, but she wanted to brighten his hospital room. When she walked in, Daniel's face lit up. He looked thinner than before, his skin paler, but his smile was as warm as ever. Layla, he said, his voice weak but filled with genuine joy. She set the plant on the windowsill and pulled a chair to his bedside. I figured this place could use a little life. Daniel chuckled softly. You've already brought plenty of that. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Layla told him about her work at the shelter, the new friendships she was forming, and how much his gift had changed her perspective. Daniel listened intently, his eyes filled with pride. I knew you'd do something amazing, he said. I just needed to give you the chance. Layla felt tears prick at her eyes. You've done more for me than I can ever repay. You've already repaid me, Daniel replied, just by being who you are. As Layla's life continued to improve, she couldn't escape the memories of her struggles. The nights spent crying in the dark, the humiliation of begging her landlord for extensions, the constant ache of not knowing if she'd make it through another month. One evening, as she sorted donations at the shelter, she came across a young woman with tear-streaked cheeks and a battered suitcase. Are you okay? Layla asked gently. The woman shook her head, her voice breaking as she said, I don't know where else to go. Layla sat beside her, listening as the woman poured out her story. A string of bad luck, toxic relationships, and a crushing sense of failure. It was like hearing her own story from years ago. You're not alone, Layla said firmly. And you're not invisible. You gonna get through this? The woman's tears slowed as she looked at Layla with a glimmer of hope. That night, Layla realized that Daniel's kindness had created a ripple effect. His gesture had changed her life, and now she was in a position to do the same for others. A month later, Layla received a call from Jordan. Daniel's condition had worsened, and he had been moved to hospice care. Layla visited him that same day, her heart heavy with dread. When she entered his room, he looked frilier than ever, but his eyes still held the spark she'd come to admire. Layla, he said, his voice barely a whisper. She took his hand, holding it gently. I'm here. Daniel smiled faintly. I have one last request. Layla's throat tightened. Anything. Keep making the world a little brighter, he said. Promise me? Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. I promise. Daniel passed away a few days later, leaving Layla with a profound sense of loss and an even stronger determination to honor his legacy. She continued her work at the shelter, expanding their programs and becoming a voice for those who felt unseen. The small house Daniel had left her became a sanctuary for people in need, a place where kindness and second chances thrived. Through her efforts, Layla saw firsthand how one act of kindness could ripple outward, touching countless lives. And every time she felt doubt creeping in, she remembered Daniel's smile, his unwavering belief in her, and the promise she'd made. Stop right there. The words shot out of Arthur's mouth with more force than he intended. Heads turned in the polished marble foyer of the bank, but Arthur's world had already shrunk to a single focal point, the golden pendant hanging from the neck of the young teller behind the counter. Clara, her name badge red, paused mid-sentence, her eyes widening slightly. Sir, she asked, startled but maintaining her professional demeanor. Arthur stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. That pendant, he said, his voice taut with urgency. Where did you get it? She instinctively touched the delicate charm resting against her skin, her fingers brushing its surface. This? It was a gift from my grandmother, she said slowly, her brow furrowing. Why? Arthur didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His mind was racing, his thoughts fragmented and wild. That pendant, it wasn't just familiar. It was exact. The last time he'd seen it, it had been around the neck of his daughter, Emma, the day she vanished without a trace. 20 years of searching, of dead ends and shattered hopes, came crashing into this one surreal moment. Are you all right, sir? Clara asked, her voice laced with genuine concern. Arthur forced a strained smile and stepped back, waving his hand dismissively. I'm fine. Just memories. But inside, he was anything but fine. His pulse roared in his ears as he turned and walked briskly toward the exit, leaving the faint scent of sterilized bank air behind. That evening, Arthur sat in his dimly lit study, staring at the fire crackling in the hearth. In his hand was a photograph, the last one ever taken of Emma. Her eyes sparkled with laughter as she grinned at the camera, her tiny hands clutching the same golden pendant now worn by a stranger. He had spent 2 decades chasing shadows, following every rumor, every whisper that might lead him back to her. Each dead end had chipped away at his resolve until hope itself became a burden. But now, for the first time in years, that burden felt lighter. The pendant wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. He felt it in his bones, in the same way he had always felt that Emma was still out there, waiting for him to find her. Arthur picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Jacob Harper," the gruff voice said on the other end. "Jacob, it's Arthur," he said, his voice steady but heavy with unspoken emotions. "I think I found something. I need your help." By the next morning, Jacob had already begun his investigation. A retired private investigator, Jacob had worked with Arthur in the early years of Emma's disappearance. He had been relentless back then, chasing down every lead, but time had dulled their pursuit. Now the fire was rekindled. "Her name's Clara Dawson," Jacob told Arthur during their first update call. 25 years old, works at the bank. Raised by her grandmother after her parents supposedly died in a car accident. But here's the catch. There's barely any record of her before she turned 18. Arthur's hand tightened around the phone. "What do you mean, barely any record?" "I mean, it's like someone wiped her early history clean," Jacob said. "No school records, no medical files, nothing substantial. And her grandmother, Margaret Dawson, wasn't exactly forthcoming when I spoke to her. She claimed the pendant belonged to Clara's mother, but I don't buy it." Arthur's mind raced. The pieces didn't fit, unless someone had gone to great lengths to ensure they wouldn't. Arthur couldn't stay away. The sight of Clara's pendant haunted him, and he needed to know more. 2 days later, he walked back into the bank. Clara greeted him with the same polite smile, but when he asked to speak to her in private, her brows knit with concern. In the privacy of a small conference room, Arthur laid his cards on the table. "Clara, I need to ask you something deeply personal." Her unease was palpable, but she nodded. "All right." Arthur gestured toward her necklace. "That pendant. Do you know where your grandmother got it?" Clara frowned, her hand instinctively touching the charm. "She always said it belonged to my mother, that it was a family heirloom." "Why?" Arthur swallowed hard. "Because that exact pendant belonged to my daughter, Emma. She disappeared 20 years ago. I've been looking for her ever since." Clara's face drained of color. "You think I don't know," Arthur admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "But the resemblance, the timing, the pendant, it's too much to ignore. I need to know the truth." Clara agreed to a DNA test, though she was visibly shaken by the implications. Arthur's hope surged, tempered only by the fear of yet another disappointment. He barely slept in the days that followed, pacing his study and staring at Emma's photograph as if willing the results to come sooner. When the envelope finally arrived, Arthur's hands trembled as he tore it open. His eyes scanned the document, and his breath hitched. It was true. Clara Dawson was, in fact, Emma Clark. The joy of reunion was short-lived. Jacob's investigation uncovered a sinister truth. Emma's abduction had been orchestrated by Jonathan Wells, a former business associate of Arthur's. The reason? Revenge. "Wells blamed you for the collapse of his company," Jacob explained. "He lost everything and decided to take it out on you. By taking Emma." Arthur's blood boiled. The thought of a petty vendetta stealing 2 decades of his daughter's life made his skin crawl. Arthur confronted Wells at his sprawling estate. "You took her," he roared, his voice echoing through the marble halls. Wells, calm and unrepentant, leaned back in his chair. "You ruined me, Arthur. I wanted you to feel the same emptiness." "You're a monster," Arthur spat, "and you'll pay for what you've done." With Wells behind bars, Arthur and Emma began the long, painful process of rebuilding their relationship. There were moments of joy and moments of heartbreak as they grappled with the years stolen from them. But slowly, they found their way back to each other. For Emma, formerly Clara, life had become an overwhelming whirlpool of revelations. She stood in the grand hallway of her newfound father's estate, staring at the family photos lining the walls. A young Arthur with a beaming Emma stared back at her in countless frames. She felt a pang of guilt and sadness. She didn't recognize the man or the memories he so clearly cherished. "Do you remember this one?" Arthur asked gently, holding up a frame where a toddler Emma sat on his shoulders, her tiny hands gripping his hair with glee. Emma shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry." Arthur's face faltered for a moment, but he quickly masked his disappointment. "That's okay," he said, placing the photo back on the shelf. "We'll make new ones." Despite his optimism, the void of 2 decades loomed heavily between them. Emma struggled to reconcile the identity she'd built as Clara with the person she was meant to be, Emma Clark, a daughter stolen from her rightful life. The transition wasn't just difficult for Emma. Arthur wrestled with anger, guilt, and determination. He wanted to help Emma heal, but the betrayal of those who had taken her demanded his attention. As Jacob delved deeper into the Dawson family's past, another layer of deceit unraveled. "I've got something," Jacob said during one of their late-night calls. Margaret Dawson wasn't just complicit in raising Emma. She knew exactly who she was. Arthur's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" Margaret wasn't paid just to take Emma in. She was part of Wells' inner circle. She owed him favors, serious ones, and this was how she paid him back. Arthur's heart sank. Margaret had seemed like a frail, unassuming woman during Jacob's interviews. Now, she was the final piece in a decades-old conspiracy. If she had willingly hidden Emma, then she had answers to questions that had tormented Arthur for years. Arthur drove to Margaret's small, aging home on the edge of the city. The woman greeted him with a wary look when she opened the door, her hand trembling as she clutched her cardigan. "I know who you are," Margaret said before Arthur could speak. "And I know why you're here." "Then you know I won't leave without the truth," Arthur replied, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Margaret shuffled to the living room, lowering herself into an armchair. "I never wanted to hurt her," she began, her voice quivering. "Emma was a sweet girl, but I had no choice." Arthur leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "You always had a choice. Why did you take her?" Margaret wrung her hands, staring at the floor. "Wells came to me when Emma, was just a baby. I owed him money, more than I could ever repay. He told me about you, about what you did to him. He said taking your daughter would balance the scales." Arthur clenched his fists, his anger threatening to boil over. "So you just went along with it? You stole my child and pretended she was your granddaughter." Margaret flinched. "He said he'd ruin me if I didn't. I thought I could keep her safe, give her a good life. And I did. I loved her as my own." "Loved her?" Arthur's voice cracked. "You didn't love her. You imprisoned her. You robbed her of her family, her identity, and 20 years of her life." Margaret's head hung low, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I am." Arthur stood abruptly, his jaw set. "You'll answer for this. Every person who kept us apart will." While Arthur sought justice, Emma was left to confront her fractured sense of self. She returned to Margaret's home one evening, not to seek answers, but to demand closure. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emma asked, her voice trembling as she stood in the doorway. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was protecting you." Emma let out a bitter laugh. "Protecting me? By lying to me? By letting me believe I was Clara Dawson when I was Emma Clark all along." Margaret reached out, but Emma stepped back. "I loved you," Margaret said softly. "That part wasn't a lie." Emma's voice cracked as she replied, "If you loved me, you wouldn't have let me live a life built on lies." With Margaret's confession and Jacob's evidence, Arthur's legal team pursued both her and Wells. The case became a media sensation, with headlines painting Wells as a cruel mastermind and Margaret as a complicit accomplice. The court's decision was swift. Wells received a lengthy prison sentence, while Margaret faced charges for her role in concealing Emma's identity. Though justice was served, the emotional toll on Emma and Arthur was profound. Emma grappled with guilt over her attachment to Margaret, while Arthur struggled to rebuild his daughter's trust. Months passed, and the pain of the past slowly began to fade. Arthur and Emma took small steps toward healing, learning to laugh together and share moments of quiet joy. They revisited places Arthur had once frequented with Emma as a child, from sunny parks to ice cream parlors. One afternoon, as they walked through a blooming garden, Emma spoke. "Do you think I'll ever feel like me again? Like I know who I am?" Arthur placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're Emma Clark," he said gently, "but you're also the person you've been all these years. Both are real, and both are you." Emma smiled faintly, the words bringing a small measure of peace. The day Emma officially reclaimed her identity was one of quiet celebration. She legally changed her name back to Emma Clark, a symbolic step toward reclaiming the life stolen from her. Arthur watched proudly as she signed the papers, tears welling in his eyes. "I never thought I'd see this day," he admitted. "But here we are." Emma squeezed his hand. "Thank you for never giving up." Father and daughter continued to rebuild, their bond growing stronger with time. On the anniversary of her disappearance, they visited the site of her abduction, a small garden now overgrown with wildflowers. "This is where it all changed," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma knelt, touching the soft petals of a flower. "And this is where we start again?" The glass door shattered into fragments as a frantic knock resounded, startling everyone inside the dimly lit lobby. Jacob, now the reluctant caretaker of the once luxurious Highview Hotel, spun around, his pulse spiking. The echo of desperation filled the room before he could even respond. "Please," a young woman's voice cracked through the night. "Let me in. I need shelter." He hesitated, eyes darting to the shadowy outline of the figure outside. His gut told him to turn her away. This place, his family's pride for decades, had turned into little more than a forgotten relic. No one came here anymore. Not since the accidents, the lawsuits, the failures. But her voice cut through his inner turmoil, sharp and raw. Against his better judgment, Jacob stepped forward and unlatched the door. A cold gust rushed in with the girl. She was pale, trembling under a threadbare jacket, her hands clutching a tattered backpack. Her eyes, wide and full of a haunted desperation, locked onto his. "I just need a place," she whispered, her breath clouding in the air. "Just for a night." Jacob swallowed, unsure whether it was pity, caution, or his own aching loneliness compelling him. "The hotel's closed," he said firmly, hoping to mask his wavering resolve. "There's nothing here for you." Her shoulders sagged, but she didn't back away. "I don't care. I'll sleep in the lobby if I have to." "Please." His jaw tightened, but he stepped aside, letting her in. "You can stay, but no promises it'll be comfortable." Jacob flicked the dim lobby lights back on, illuminating the once grand reception area. Dust hung in the air like a ghostly haze, and the faint smell of mildew lingered. The young woman stood awkwardly by the entrance, her eyes scanning the peeling wallpaper and tarnished brass fixtures. "Not exactly five-star accommodations," Jacob muttered, folding his arms. "It's perfect," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but there was something in her tone that sounded genuine. "Perfect?" Jacob raised an eyebrow. "You've got low standards." She glanced at him, lips curving into the faintest smile. "I've stayed in worse places." For a moment, Jacob was taken aback. There was something unnervingly calm about her, as though she had been through more than her age would suggest. He shook it off, stepping behind the reception desk. "I've still got water and power running," he said, pulling a key from the rack. "Room 208 is clean. Bed's decent. No one slept there in a while, though." She stepped closer, hesitating. "I can't pay much." "Don't worry about it," he interrupted, sliding the key toward her. "Consider it charity. Just keep to yourself, all right?" Her face softened with gratitude, but she didn't say more. Gripping the key, she disappeared up the staircase, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Jacob watched her go, wondering what kind of trouble she was running from. The logical part of him screamed that this was a mistake, that she could be anyone, dangerous even. But another part of him, the part that still felt tethered to the hotel's once bustling past, found solace in her presence. The following morning, Jacob was startled awake by the sound of movement. He had fallen asleep on the lobby couch, a whiskey glass still balanced precariously in his hand. Groaning, he sat up, expecting the worst. The sound wasn't coming from outside, it was from inside the hotel. He crept toward the noise, wary but curious, and stopped short when he saw her. The girl was crouched near the reception desk, scrubbing the floor with a wet rag. A bucket of soapy water sat beside her. Her hair was tied back, and she worked with quiet determination, her lips pressed into a firm line. "What the hell are you doing?" Jacob asked, his voice cutting through the stillness. She jumped, startled, and then relaxed when she saw him. "It was filthy," she said simply, gesturing at the floor. "Figured I'd help clean up." "Cleaning?" Jacob repeated, incredulous. "This place is a lost cause. It's not worth the effort." "It's worth something," she replied, her gaze meeting his. There was steel in her voice now, a challenge he hadn't expected. "Places like this, they don't deserve to be forgotten." Jacob didn't know how to respond. For years, he'd avoided facing the hotel's decline, treating it like a wound too painful to tend to. Yet here was this stranger scrubbing away like it still mattered. "Suit yourself," he muttered, retreating back to his desk. But as the day went on, he found himself drawn to her quiet resilience. She cleaned relentlessly, wiping down windows, rearranging furniture, even polishing the brass handles on the front doors. By evening, the lobby looked almost alive. Jacob leaned against the counter, watching her as she finished sweeping the floors. "You're not just passing through, are you?" he asked, breaking the silence. She paused, glancing up at him. "What makes you say that? People who pass through don't care enough to clean." Her eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite read. She set the broom down, brushing her hands on her jeans. "I needed a place to feel useful again," she admitted. "Is that so bad?" Jacob hesitated. "No, just unusual." A faint smile crossed her lips. "Maybe you should try it sometime. You might like how it feels." He didn't respond, but her words stayed with him. That night, as he sat alone in the dimly lit lobby, he caught himself imagining what the hotel used to be. Bustling guests, clinking glasses in the dining room, laughter echoing through the halls. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. The days turned into a pattern. The girl, whose name he finally learned was Elise, continued her self-imposed mission to restore the hotel, room by room. Jacob found himself joining in, albeit reluctantly at first. Together, they scrubbed away years of grime, patch-peeling wallpaper, and even managed to repair some of the broken furniture. "What brought you here, Elise?" Jacob asked one afternoon as they repainted the lobby walls. She hesitated, her brush hovering mid-stroke. "A lot of bad decisions," she said quietly. "And a need to start over." He didn't press her for more, sensing the weight behind her words. By the end of the week, the transformation was undeniable. The Highview Hotel, once a forgotten relic, began to look like a place with purpose again. Elise had even taken to placing fresh flowers in the rooms, a small but thoughtful touch that made the place feel alive. When the first unexpected guest arrived, a weary traveler passing through town, Jacob nearly turned them away. But Elise intervened, her confidence catching him off guard. "Stay," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "We've got a room ready for you." The traveler agreed, and soon, word began to spread. A week later, Jacob found himself staring at the bookings ledger, his hands trembling slightly. 3 names. 3 actual, paying guests were staying at the Highview Hotel. The impossibility of it struck him like a wave, leaving him speechless. "How?" he muttered to himself. Elise, dusting off an antique clock by the reception desk, glanced over at him with a smirk. "You're welcome." He shook his head, unable to suppress a small smile. "Don't get cocky. This could just be a fluke." "Maybe," she said, setting the clock down carefully. "Or maybe this place is finally waking up." Jacob leaned back against the desk, watching her. She had a way of speaking about the hotel as if it were alive, as if the faded walls and creaky floors held a soul of their own. He hadn't believed her at first, but now he wasn't so sure. The guests trickled in slowly at first, mostly travelers who had stumbled across the hotel while looking for something affordable and charming. Elise worked tirelessly to make each stay memorable, her innate warmth and attention to detail shining through in everything she did. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Jacob found her sitting in the dining room, a notebook open in front of her. "What's that?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from her. She held it up, revealing sketches and handwritten notes. "Ideas for the hotel." Jacob arched an eyebrow, leaning forward to inspect the pages. They were filled with diagrams for rearranging furniture, suggestions for themed weekends, and even recipes for homemade pastries to serve at breakfast. "You've been thinking about this a lot," he said, impressed despite himself. Elise shrugged, a faint blush creeping up her neck. "This place feels special, like it could really be something again. I just want to help." For the first time in years, Jacob felt a flicker of hope. "All right," he said slowly. "Let's try it your way." With Elise's ideas leading the charge, the hotel began to thrive. They worked late into the nights, often collapsing into laughter over burnt attempts at baking or mishaps while moving heavy furniture. Despite the hard work, Jacob felt more alive than he had in years. But as the bookings increased and the hotel regained its charm, the shadows of their past began to creep back in. One night, as they were locking up, Jacob found Elise sitting on the edge of the fountain in the garden. Her usual energy was gone, replaced by a quiet melancholy. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. She didn't answer right away, her eyes fixed on the rippling water. "Do you ever feel like you're running from something?" Jacob stiffened. "Sometimes." Elise sighed, tucking her hair behind her ear. "I wasn't completely honest with you when I came here. I didn't just stumble across this place. I was looking for somewhere to disappear." Jacob stayed quiet, sensing the weight of what she was about to say. "I left a bad situation," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone I trusted hurt me, took everything from me. Coming here was my way of escaping, of trying to rebuild myself." Jacob's jaw tightened, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "If they hurt you, they don't deserve to have any hold over you now." Her eyes met his, glistening with unshed tears. "It's not that simple. The past doesn't just let go." "No," he agreed. "But you've built something here, Elise. Something they can't touch." Her lips quirked into a faint smile. "You think so?" "I know so," he said firmly. For the first time since she arrived, Elise leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together in silence, the cool night air wrapping around them like a protective shroud. As the weeks went on, the Highview Hotel became a beacon in the small town. Guests spoke of its cozy charm, the care put into every detail, and the warmth of its owners. Jacob and Elise became an inseparable team, their connection deepening with each shared victory and quiet moment. But peace is a way of drawing the storms. It started with a phone call. Jacob was fixing a broken railing on the front porch when Elise came out, her face pale and her hands trembling. "Who was it?" Jacob asked, setting his tools aside. She swallowed hard, her voice shaky. "Him. He knows where I am." Jacob's blood ran cold. "What did he say?" "He wants to come here," she whispered. "To talk." The very idea of someone threatening the sanctuary they'd built together made Jacob's hands clench into fists. "He's not setting foot in this hotel. Not while I'm here." Elise shook her head. "You don't know him, Jacob. He won't stop. Then we'll make him stop." The days that followed were tense, every sound and shadow putting them on edge. Elise tried to keep busy, pouring her energy into the hotel, but Jacob could see the fear gnawing at her. When the man finally showed up, it was late at night. The headlights of his car pierced the darkness as it rolled up the gravel drive, stopping just short of the hotel's entrance. Jacob stepped out onto the porch, his heart pounding as a tall, broad-shouldered figure emerged from the car. The man's face was sharp and cruel, his eyes cold as they fixed on Jacob. "Where's Elise?" he demanded, his voice low and menacing. Jacob didn't flinch. "She doesn't want to see you." The The man took a step forward, his jaw tightening. That's not your call to make. Actually, it is, Jacob said, standing his ground. You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll call the cops. The man's lip curled into a sneer. You think you can protect her? You don't know who you're dealing with. Try me, Jacob shot back, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Inside, Elise watched from the window, her breath hitching as the confrontation unfolded. She wanted to run, to hide, but something about Jacob's unwavering stance rooted her in place. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Jacob stood firm, his fists clenched as the man approached, his shadow long under the dim porch light. The tension was palpable, each step forward filling the air with a suffocating weight. Jacob's heart pounded, but he refused to back down. This was Elise's sanctuary now, and no one, especially not this predator, was going to take that away. I'm giving you one last chance, Jacob growled, his voice low but steady. Get in your car. Leave, or you'll regret it. The man smirked, a smugness that spoke of years of manipulation. You think she's yours to protect? You don't know the first thing about her. I do. She belongs with me. From behind the window, Elise's hands trembled as she watched the exchange. Jacob's words gave her courage, but the sight of her past standing just feet away sent her spiraling. The walls she'd carefully rebuilt seemed to crumble, exposing the wounds she thought she had buried. No, she whispered to herself, gripping the windowsill. Not this time. The man took another step, towering over Jacob now, his expression darkening. Move, he ordered. Jacob didn't budge. No. The tension exploded. The man lunged forward, shoving Jacob hard against the railing. Wood creaked and splintered under the force, but Jacob didn't let up. Fueled by anger and the need to protect, he swung back, landing a punch square across the man's jaw. The two grappled in the dim light, their struggle violent and chaotic. The man was bigger, stronger, but Jacob had resolve on his side. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos. Stop! Both men froze, panting, and turned to see Elise standing on the porch steps, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with determination. This ends now, she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear threatening to claw its way out. The man sneered. Elise, don't be stupid. You think you can just walk away from me? I already have, she said, stepping closer. You don't control me anymore. You don't scare me. And you're not welcome here. Her words hung in the air, their finality striking like thunder. The man's bravado wavered. He glanced between Elise and Jacob, weighing his options. For the first time, he saw that he wasn't in control. You'll regret this, he spat, but his voice lacked conviction. He turned, storming back to his car. Gravel crunched under his feet as he climbed in, slamming the door behind him. Jacob and Elise stood in silence, their breaths heavy as the car peeled out of the driveway, its taillights disappearing into the darkness. Inside the hotel, Jacob collapsed onto one of the lobby chairs, rubbing his sore shoulder. Elise followed, sitting across from him. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them. You didn't have to do that, Elise said finally, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. Jacob looked at her, his expression serious. Yes, I did. You deserve better than to keep running. And I'm not about to let someone like him take this place away from you. She smiled faintly, tears pooling in her eyes. Thank you. They sat in silence for a while, the hotel quiet around them. Despite everything, a sense of peace began to settle. The days that followed were transformative. Elise, no longer burdened by the fear of her past, threw herself into the hotel with renewed purpose. Jacob worked alongside her, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Word about the Highview Hotel continued to spread. Guests praised its unique charm, and Elise's warmth left a lasting impression on everyone who walked through the doors. Jacob, once reluctant to even step into the building, found himself thriving in the role of caretaker and partner. One afternoon, as they prepared for another busy weekend, Elise stopped Jacob in the hallway. I've been thinking, she said, her voice hesitant but hopeful. Dangerous, Jacob teased, though his smile was genuine. She rolled her eyes. I'm serious. I think I want to stay here. For good? Jacob blinked, surprised. You mean that? She nodded. This place saved me. And so did you. I want to keep building this, together. For a moment, Jacob was speechless. Then he grinned. I can't think of anyone I'd rather do this with. Months passed, and the Highview Hotel became a beacon of hope, not just for travelers, but for the entire town. Its story, a tale of redemption and resilience, drew attention from local media and even a few travel blogs. Bookings surged, and Jacob and Elise worked tirelessly to maintain the personal touch that had made the hotel so special. One evening, after the last guest had retired to their room, Jacob found Elise sitting on the garden bench, looking out at the stars. He joined her, the night air crisp and cool. You've been quiet, he said, nudging her shoulder gently. She smiled, leaning against him. Just thinking about how far we've come. When I first got here, I didn't think I'd stay more than a night. And now this is home, Jacob finished for her. She looked up at him, her eyes soft. Yeah, it is. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of the night surrounding them. Elise, Jacob said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. You've changed my life. This place, it wasn't alive until you walked in. I wasn't alive until you walked in. Her cheeks flushed, and she reached for his hand. I think we saved each other. Jacob smiled, his heart full. The Highview Hotel thrived, not just as a business, but as a testament to the power of second chances. Jacob and Elise, bound by their shared journey, found not only purpose, but a love that made every challenge worth it. And as the stars shone brightly above the hotel that night, it was clear that the story of the Highview wasn't one of endings. It was just the beginning.